Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Third Take. My name is Lubaba,
My name is Taha.
and we are your hosts. Today is March 5th, and we are on day 6 of the U.S.-Israel-led war on Iran. We're in the midst of what's shaping up to be World War III. We're watching our fuel supply in our world dwindle. We're watching the climate crisis be exacerbated, and we're seeing cultural wars that divide people across the globe being more polarizing than ever.
Yeah, exactly, Lubaba. And I think in order to truly understand this latest US Israeli led aggression on Iran, I think we really have to put things into historical context. And we can start that with 1953, because in August 1953 is when the then Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, was overthrown in a coup, which was orchestrated by the US and UK. And a lot of it basically came from the fact that Mossadegh, the then prime minister that was overthrown, wanted to make sure that Iran's oil was nationalized. And it was the time of the Cold War. It's the whole socialist versus capitalist blocks.
Tango.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And at that point, British Petroleum, uh, basically had a huge stake in Iranian oil, and they wanted to make sure that they control it.
So by British Petroleum, you mean like the company BP, correct?
BP,
Yeah.
yes.
So I like for folks like myself, like I recognize British Petroleum and have grown up hearing it as BP.
Yeah,
Spill,
because you
that's
love
spill.
oil and you love the oil industry and you love
Okay,
fossil
because they
fuels.
love to spill oil and make headlines for
Lobaba
it.
Gemma supports the fossil fuel industry. You heard it here first, folks.
You didn't. But yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I think that at that point, the Shah of Iran, right, was basically he became the leader of the country.
Right.
And it became like a one party system, from no longer a pluralistic system. And I think it's really important that to understand Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was the Shah of Iran back then, to understand his background. I think a lot of people think that he was part of this dynasty, the Pahlavi dynasty that reigned for like centuries and centuries. Not really. So his dad, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi's dad, actually um, was not part of the aristocracy and was just like an army soldier
Okay.
who fought for the British, and then the British basically gave him the resources to go and take over Iran
I
from
see.
the Qajar dynasty that was there. I'm not a fan of any dynasty because, unlike many people, I'm not a monarchist.
Yeah.
To
Like
be
dining.
a monarchist in 2026 is a choice, honey. That is a choice. And it's a choice that people are surprisingly not ashamed of enough, because
Yeah.
a monarchy, I know we are living under a monarchy here,
Yeah.
but like, are we proud of that?
Like, well, people like
Love King Charles, obviously, but like, yeah,
love Bridgerton, but like people will
not
glorify
Bridget.
things like Bridgerton in today's day and age when like it doesn't look like the season on the regular.
No,
It looks like
absolutely not. The diamond of the season is a blood diamond, so
yeah,
stay away.
yeah.
And I think that so then the Shah of Iran that traces his dynasty to his dad. So this Shah of Iran now, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, from 1953 to 1979, would rule with an iron fist.
Right.
And it would turn a lot of like progress would be made in Iran as well. I don't
Okay.
want to be one of those people that doesn't recognize the fact that there were education reforms, there were land reforms, there were billions of dollars that were invested into local industry. Iran's GDP grew. But we also have to be critical of everything and look at it from the lens of what was it that people in Iran, not just the upper echelon and the elite, the loyalists, but everybody else, like what were they going through?
Yeah.
And that's something I think it's really important for us to cover in today's episode in order to really put things into context of where we see the Iranian diaspora today. And it's not a monolith, no matter how much people want you to think that.
Or the US wants you to think that.
Or the US wants you to think that, or I don't know, like whoever wants you to think that. And I think that considering the Shah of Iran, during his time from 1953 onwards, after Mossadegh was overthrown, until 1979, he was the last ruling Shah of Iran, because
Okay.
after 1979 we had the Islamic Revolution, and Ayatollah became supreme leader,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ruhollah Khomeini.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also really crucial to understand that Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran during that time, also really idealized a history of Iran, a past of Iran that was linked to Cyrus the Great.
Right.
So we're
Okay.
going back to like the times of Babylon,
Yeah.
and there was this immense focus on distancing yourself from basically the region that you're a part of. So there
Okay.
was this immense focus on like, we are Aryans, we're white, and the reason why you see brown people amongst us is because we were, victims of invasions. So it's a very weird. I know people will try to debate me on this, but I'm sorry. Like, I have to draw the line at colorism and internalized racism and just like
Yeah.
complete revisionist history. And I think it's important to keep in mind that this Cyrus the Great connection is also something that a lot of the Israeli leadership from the very beginning has harkened back to the times of Cyrus the Great,
Mm.
when Iran was this empire, right? So
Right.
during the Shah of Iran's rule, he had good relations with Israel, he had good relations with the West, he was a Western ally, and he also introduced something called the White Revolution, modernizing Iran and becoming more westernized, right? And I think, obviously there's value in looking at your history pre-Islam as well, but I think to completely revise history and, be like, oh, we're devoid of all of this, and
Right.
this never happened, and we're actually going back to this time, which you will hear throughout this podcast, actually didn't sit well with a lot of people as well, right? And I think that's the sad part, is that there could have been a very beautiful way to honor both histories, but there was a concerted effort to erase one.
That's such a
um
good point, though.
yeah.
Like, honestly, that makes me think of like why archives and like archiving is so important, and also why things like information are
Mhm.
like chased so often in times of war, right? Why sources of information are targeted in times of war, right? I think you raise a lot of really good points where it makes me think about how, a measure of good leadership is like how well can people live, right? How can people access their necessities? How comfortably can people get around, talk to each other, build communities, and be able to just go about their day to day lives? Like,
Absolutely.
these are really the things that are important at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's important to also highlight that there was, like, in the beginning, this time under his Muhammad Reza Pahlavi's monarchy, when things were looking pretty good economically, because you're an ally of the West, you're getting billions of dollars of you're getting
Right.
billions of dollars of investment. Your local industry is thriving. Your mission to the people is that I'm going to make Iran a self-dependent country. But the Shah was also a brutal monarch, and you see that through the formation of SAVAK.
Right.
SAVAK was basically a central intelligence agency, kind of like the CIA, but of Iran under the Shah of Iran, right? And it was formed by the help of CIA and Mossad. So CIA is the American intelligence, Mossad is the Israeli
I see.
intelligence.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think SAWAK was founded around 1957, 58. And they basically operated as a secret police force, right? So they gathered intelligence. They made sure that the Shah was, his like rule was maintained and he was safe. They also oppressed and crushed any form of dissent. And I think this is
Right.
something that people really don't like when we bring up, because people say the Shah of Iran was good, everything was great, and then the Islamic Revolution came and destroyed everything. Listen, we can absolutely critique the Islamic Revolution
Yeah.
and the role that Ruhollah Khomeini and Ayatollah Ali Khomeini played in bringing Iran where it is today as well. But at the same time, it's important to mention that we can't just look at history through these rose-colored glasses and just say everything was great. No, like, there was this brutal intelligence agency, SAVAK.
Yeah.
They were oppressing people. There was major surveillance. Any sort of dissent, any sort of communist movement, socialist movements, student movements, intellectual movements were crushed and were infiltrated by, this intelligence agency. I mean, it's Cold War times,
Yeah.
right? So it's not something that is beyond the scope of anyone's imaginary. Like, it actually happened. It's real.
Yeah.
Um,
It's what all these nation states were pouring like millions and millions of dollars into.
Exactly. And the reason why nobody really cared about this intelligence agency, SAVAK's torturing of political prisoners, or intellectuals, or religious leaders, even, which was a part of it, was because, when you are against communism and you are allied with US, UK during the Cold War, like, a lot of the Western world was able to overlook these human rights abuses.
Right.
So I think that's something that I think is really important to focus on, that the Shah actually did crush dissent. I think that it's also important to keep in mind of how do you define freedom, because the way that I see some people today critique the current Iranian government, if they were critiquing Shah's Iranian government back in the day like that, they would be imprisoned.
Right.
And
that's such a good point.
Yeah, and I think that's very important to keep in mind, is that, so it's like free speech for me, but not for thee, right? You are hearkening back to a time where you also weren't really free as a person that could express their political opinion.
Right, had to fit into a certain box.
Exactly.
Right.
And I know that you wanted to speak a little bit more about this as well.
Thank you, Daha. I think that sets up their conversation really well, Daha, because something that I think is also really important to remember is that SAVAK also surveilled the Iranian diaspora abroad as well. And so, particularly in Europe and the US, I think it's really important to remember this because so much of the diaspora right now, especially, is very divided. Something that I've been seeing a lot at rallies and protests also is that amongst the Iranian diaspora, there's a lot of monarchists and anti-monarchists that are coming.
It's not a monolith.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Of course. And there's a lot of folks that are coming to rallies, vocalizing what they're there to stand up for. But I think a lot of what needs to be clarified is that anti-monarchists aren't necessarily supporters of an Islamic theocracy, right? We're seeing this around the world where a lot of monarchists are aligning with pro-Israel groups that are bombing Iran in the hopes that this will free Iran, rather than do what we know war does best, right? Benefit the elite, create destruction and a distraction from other issues.
Yeah. And may I just interject for one thing? I think it's really alarming to see people say, oh, by bombing Iran, Israel and US can free the Iranian women. And I think the reason why that's alarming is because for anybody that has read any history, you would know that the first and the worst victims and survivors from war are women, children, and the elderly.
Yeah.
So what sort of a twisted logic is this? And I think I see a lot of exceptionalism happening right now in the monarchists wing of the diaspora. And you see that exceptionalism in American exceptionalism of how America and American elite and leaders and political class think they're unique,
right,
different than everybody else. And you see that Hillary Clinton has been a huge vocal supporter of American exceptionalism, right? Like, we can do no wrong, we're the best, etc. When we do wrong, there's a reason for it, whatever.
Yeah, my husband didn't know Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Allegedly. Yeah. Just covering our legal bases. But yeah, I think the other thing is, like, you see that with it Israeli state's line as well, which is always that we are the exception. We need to do this because we need to protect ourselves. We're the only states for the Jewish people. And then I think in the Iranian monarchist diaspora, you're seeing this exception too. You don't understand what it's like to live under a theocracy. It's like, actually, with all due respect, you are very much not understanding, A, that you're not the only voice in the diaspora, and B, you're not that unique. There are many people in the world that are suffering under horrible autocratic regimes, but to be sitting in your comfortable house in LA or Toronto or wherever and advocating for the bombing of your country of origin and the people there is kind of strange. I'm just
Yeah.
going to say that. And I
Yeah.
understand that there might be people there that say that, oh, well, my family lives in Iran and they are really
Yeah.
supportive of this.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe they are, but Iran is a country of 90 million people.
Yes. Yes.
So we just have to be careful because when it comes to
Yes.
the diaspora,
Yes.
why did the mainstream media not listen to the Palestinian diaspora?
Speak on it.
But now we're
Yeah.
told, shut up, listen to the Iranian diaspora. Okay, but who in the Iranian diaspora?
Yeah.
Do I listen to monarchists? Do I listen to the reality TV stars from the Shahs of Sunset TV show? Do I listen to Samira Moyuddin, who's like a journalist in Toronto, podcaster, and amazing
Mm-hmm.
researcher who's
Mm-hmm.
done very critical research on
Yeah.
this topic and
Yeah.
is a huge proponent and advocate for women's rights?
Yes.
And do I listen to Samira Moyuddin? Do I listen to, what's her name? Like, I don't want to give her like Galmari or something. Goldie Garmari,
Yeah,
Rose Garmari, I
Goldie
don't know.
something.
But it's like,
Yeah.
they're both part of the diaspora.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this like sort of
Yeah.
identity politics of like just listen to the
Yeah.
diaspora. First of all, the diaspora is not a monolith.
No.
Anyway, to come back to that, I
Yeah.
think you're specifically talking about like going to rallies in Toronto and seeing this divide in the Iranian diaspora.
Because we like at the end of the day, an anti-war stance and an anti-war movement is not a pro-theocracy movement, right? And I think that's a really important line that we need to draw and that we need to harden, right? I think this alliance between Israel and monarchists are nothing new. You know, Israel continues to benefit from this allegiance as they have since 1979 when the Shah was overthrown, because the Shah was an ally of Israel. And this idea that, you know, violence and destruction could be the only way to find liberation, freedom of any sort from an oppressive regime. This is an idea that is fed to us, or this is an idea that is fed to people by these
colonizers.
Yeah, exactly. That's really
and
what
the
it
elites.
is. The elites, imperial powers, etc. It is the line that is used in order to divide people starkly, right?
Mhm.
So when people are so divided by our elites, by a lot of these Western imperial powers, how do we darken the line that says anti-monarchists are not pro-Islamic theocracy, like theocrats, right?
Yeah, or theocracy of any kind. For instance, what we're seeing in Israel right now, where you have very right-wing ministers in the government who are basically openly stating, I mean, I really want people to be clear about this. I'm not saying this. These are ministers in the Israeli cabinet who often critics of people like me are like, oh, it's just one or two people. They're fringe. No, they're part of your government's cabinet. And they're saying things like, you know, this should be all Jewish land. They are advocating for Jewish supremacy.
Yeah. So, this is what we've fought for the last 40 years.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's such a good point because Benjamin Netanyahu said that.
Yeah.
Literally 2 or 3 days ago, when they started this war, America and Israel started this war, he said, like, I've been waiting for this for 40 years, which basically tells you that this is not something, because, you know, like, according to Netanyahu, Iran has been 2 weeks away from making a nuclear bomb. Like, he's been saying this for so long, it's almost lost all meaning.
Yeah, that's like the media headline that they've been pushing.
And I think that coming back to, obviously, I'm glad you brought up the, the divide and the polarization in the diaspora. And I think a lot of the times we are also like that group of like millennial Gen Z people where we were told, like, if a person from that community is speaking, don't say anything.
Yeah, like center them.
Yeah.
Which is important, of course.
Which is important. But at the same time, I think we have been fed a very, like...
Passive and... like list of ways we can show solidarity.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind that, like, you know, if I want to listen to the Black community, do I listen to Angela Davis, civil rights activist Angela Davis, icon Angela Davis, or do I listen to Ben Carson, who is a Republican neurosurgeon who ran for a Republican Party president. Do I listen to Don Lemon, who's like has more Eurocentric views on America, or do I listen to somebody that is more critical, right? Somebody that
Yeah.
is Cory Bush,
Yeah. Yeah.
who is a politician and activist in America. So
Hmm.
it's very important that we like not let this thing of like, oh, if you're not part of that community, you can't say anything. You actually can. What you cannot do is disparage or be racist, which we would
Yes.
never be.
Exactly. That's the
And
point.
I mean, I also want to say, like, I can never understand like the hurt and the just like the emotions that people in the Iranian diaspora are going through, whether they're monarchist or not. Like
Yeah.
to know people that have been killed, to know
Yeah.
people who have been oppressed, to know yourself. A lot of them have, they're refugees. Like I
Yeah.
understand that, but that then again does not mean that everything you say is like a revelation from God and all of us just
Yes.
need to like get in line.
Right.
That's not how things work.
Right.
That's not how even the Palestinian diaspora works. There's
No.
actually a lot of disagreement
Yes.
amongst the Palestinian
Yes.
diaspora of like
Yes.
what the solution is
Yeah.
for the question of Palestine,
Yeah.
right?
And even
Like,
in Palestine, there is so much,
absolutely.
there are differing opinions amongst Palestinians in Palestine as well, right?
Absolutely. Just like there is in any society.
Yeah.
I'm glad we are touching upon this as well, because
Yes.
I know that there's people that are going to be upset with us for even talking about this, but okay, be upset. But what I did want to say is like
Yeah.
you had initially mentioned when you were doing the research that you wanted to talk a little bit more about 1978,
Yes.
a year before 1979, math, and when
You're
the
so good at math.
thank
Wow.
you,
He, hims, and
1978.
STEM.
I'm dead. Why would you say that?
He, hims, and STEM.
We're talking about World War III, and Lubaba's like, haha, which I get, because if we don't make jokes, we would
No,
go
because we're
crazy.
losing our minds.
Yeah. So I know you wanted to talk about 1978
Yes.
and the violence that erupted in Tehran and Iran.
Yes, I still want to bring us back to the crash course so that we really like can set the stage for what's happening in Iran, so that folks really know
Yeah.
like what has led up to the aggression, but also just like the conflict in opinions of amongst a lot of Iranian diaspora, Iranians in Iran, as well as folks in related movements that are chiming in. So I think I want to bring us back to 1978. And like you said, Taha, the Shah was not just anti-Islamic clergy, he was also anti-communist, anti-student leaders, etc. And there were a lot of dissenting protests that rose in the 1970s because of this. Something that really shifted the landscape in Iran was a problem in August of 1978. There was a fire at the Cinema Rex that killed about 400 people. Now, Savak said that the fire was started by Islamic militants. Pro-Khomeini people said it was a false flag operation funded by Savak.
So they were like saying Shah told the Savak to do it and blame it on
exactly. Yes.
Islamic militants.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so most people in Iran started believing that Savak did this. More protests started happening. And this fire basically caused the country's people to effectively become economically paralyzed. There were protests every day in every part of the country. And finally, on January 16th of 1979, Pahlavi went into exile as the last Iranian monarch, or Shah. On February 1st, Khomeini was invited back to Iran by the Iranian government. He was greeted by millions on the street. He was welcomed with cheers, and the government was saying, let's find a better future. By February 11th, they took down the monarchy. The pro-Khomeini revolution and different guerrilla groups and other forces, they really overwhelmed the Shah's military and their troops. And so many pro-Shah Iranians, they left the country at that point. By March 1979, over 98%, and this is, of course, something that can be disputed and has been disputed sometimes, but
there was a referendum.
Yeah. In March 1979, there was a referendum held, and some folks might dispute this number as well. But at the time, over 98% of Iranian people approved the shift to the Islamic Republic. Now, in this process, Khomeini was then claimed as the supreme leader.
Yeah, and I think, like, again, I really want to be clear. I'm personally never in favor of a government that is based on a religion.
If you know anything about the it's that. Like,
okay, well, I don't dislike religion. I think religion
no.
is a beautiful. I feel
No,
like
but as a
it's
governance
so
model,
tough
yeah.
to talk about these things because you're like, am I offending these people? Am I offending
Right. Yeah.
Pakistanis now? Am I offending people?
My mom.
But I think it's important to keep in mind,
Yeah.
right? Like for me, I think the government needs to make decisions that are not guided by a single religious belief when you have a society where people of different religions live, right?
It's
and
true.
I think that that's why in the West here we are speaking up against the rise of evangelical Christians.
Yes.
Who are like, basically, for anybody that doesn't know, evangelicalism in Christianity is like a very extreme form of Orthodox Christianity that is very racist a lot of the times and has a lot of roots in white supremacy. Don't believe me, hate me for saying that, go look it up.
Go read. Sometimes the book you need to read might even be in your hotel drawer.
I'm screaming. Yeah, I once read the Book of Mormon that was at the hotel, and I mean, it gave me a lot of insight into Mormonism, and that's all I will say.
Yeah.
No disrespect to anybody, honestly, I don't mean it that way. But just to, go back to this, I think it's important for people to again know, like, when we talk about these things, we're not saying Khomeini was like this incredibly spotless person that never made a mistake.
No.
Because even during his government, you have to understand that he came to power, helped abolish a monarchy that was extremely unpopular at that time in 1979 in Iran. And a lot of leftist groups actually felt that they did not have a seat at the table once the monarchy was overthrown, because the pro-Khomeini group was very strong,
right,
and had a lot of supporters.
Right, and they were sort of swallowed up in...
Exactly, right? And I think that another thing to keep in mind is that any leader in Iran would need the approval of Khamenei for specific things.
Interesting, I didn't know that.
It's also important to keep in mind that, Iran is a majority Shia country. Shia and Sunnis are two different sects in Islam. Amongst
They're like
other,
But Shia and Sunni are like the most popular globally at the moment.
The most popular girls in a school. Okay.
No.
Yeah, and I think like another thing to keep in mind is that Iran is actually surrounded by countries that are mostly predominantly Sunni countries, right? So on one side there's Pakistan, where most of the population is Sunni. On the other side you have Iraq, where most of the population is Sunni. Then they also border Afghanistan, they border Azerbaijan, they border many countries. And just the region in itself, like if you look at not even the countries that Iran borders, but shares the region with, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, very predominantly Sunni countries. And then Bahrain is like one of the countries in the Gulf that is actually majority Shia, but like the ruling family is Sunni.
Oh, I didn't
know
that.
That's why, and we'll come to that, and that's why like there's actually some unrest happening in Bahrain right now after Israel and America killed the Ayatollah. Khomeini that we're talking about is like the first one.
Yes.
And then when he passed away, his son, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is the person who, succeeded him and was recently killed, and was also a spiritual leader for the Shia community, and also holds immense reverence for millions and millions of people in the world.
Exactly, because he's not just like a leader in Iran, right? Like he is also an important leader in a religious practice.
Yeah.
And that's another caveat that also has led to a lot of these, polarizing opinions and difficult conversations that a lot of us, especially in the diaspora, are having now.
I think it's important to note, with being a predominantly Shia country surrounded by Sunni countries, becoming the Islamic Republic in 1979, and having a Shia cleric as a supreme leader, who led an Iran through a political order in the Middle East, where a lot of the countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iraq's Saddam Hussein later, like, were not fans of this administration.
Right.
And also, the Western Bloc during the Cold War was not a fan of this new Islamic Republic either, because obviously the Shah was a very dear ally of the Western Bloc and an ally of Israel. So again, Cold War is still going on. But I think it's important to keep in mind that one of the main goals of the Islamic Republic was to see a free Palestinian state. And according to the Islamic Republic, also the dissolution of the State of Israel, right? Obviously, these opinions are extremely controversial today, and they were even more controversial in 1979, which means that there was massive, massive ideological, political, and economic attacks on Iran, in addition to like physical attacks by countries, right? And we should be under no illusion that just because Ruhollah Khomeini was pro-Palestinian, that he was creating an Iran where people were free to have self-representation in the government. Everyday affairs of the state were not very democratic, and the regime also purged universities and other institutions that they deemed to be too Western or too anti-Islamic Republic. Right. And I think it's important, like, to talk about this. There were also left-wing Muslim political parties that actually spoke up against Khomeini, but because they were more left-leaning, he also said that they were like bastardizing the religion.
Right.
Amongst all of this, Iran became a leader in regional resistance against America and Israel. And I think this is where the context really is very important, because Iran, it did become this force where you had Iran kind of leading this axis of resistance, as they call it, against like the Western imposed order in the Middle East through Israel. And also, you know, when the Iraq war was being discussed in the US, Netanyahu from Israel actually flew to the US and said that if you go to war with Iraq, you will be able to stabilize the Middle East. And I think he is
stabilize the Middle East for who?
Yeah. So the goal is that, you know, after Iraq, they could probably go after Iran. And there were many political scientists at that time who said that the only country that would benefit the most from the invasion of Iraq would be the state of Iran. And after killing millions of people and destroying so much infrastructure and culture and just history in Iraq, the US was able to achieve really nothing except for the fact that Iran solidified itself in Iraq through militias and political parties that were more supportive of Iran. And also, you know, America left a huge power vacuum. So Iran filled that up. Because the other option was ISIS. And nobody likes that. So during this time, I mean, since 1979 until present day, Iran has been heavily sanctioned. And I know that's something that you wanted to speak to as
well. Something I really want to highlight is that in July 2015, Iran and the UN Security Council, they, together with the EU, they formally adopted the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And so this is also referred to as the Iran nuclear deal. Now, in this, there was a timetable to lift the UN arms embargoes, the UN arms embargo and other sanctions that were previously put on Iran, as long as Iran allows IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, as long as Iran allows them to oversee and monitor its nuclear program. And so Iran agrees, right? This agreement took place in January 2016, and later on was criticized by Israel, Saudi Arabia. What's interesting is that during Obama's presidency, Netanyahu flew to the US, and against the wishes of Obama, Netanyahu spoke in the US Congress about how America shouldn't implement this agreement. And, you know, lo and behold, Trump comes into power in 2017, and what does he do? But in 2018, he withdraws the US from this agreement. In doing so, he imposes maximum sanctions on Iran. He also includes sanctions that are applied to all countries and companies that do business with Iran. And so basically, he's once again cutting off Iran from the international financial system. He's crippling this country's economy once again, and the people are going to suffer once again. And so I think this is a really important dynamic to remember and a really important setup for what we are seeing in terms of the geopolitical tensions that have led to the most recent aggressions having to do with Iran, I would say over the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for people to understand that, there is a lot of talk when it comes to countries like Iran and Cuba, where people say, oh, they're suffering because of corruption of their leaders. Listen, I'm sure there is corruption in both
Yeah.
countries, but you cannot excuse the fact that crippling sanctions
Yeah.
cripple an economy and end up hurting the general populace in that country. And a lot of the time, the protests and the dissidence that comes a lot of the times is from economic insecurity.
Right. I mean, what do we complain about every day? What is the biggest issue amongst Canadians right now? Also, it's the affordability crisis.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I think bringing this all to present day, um, October 7th happened in 2023. So bringing it all back to present day, Iran and its support of Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas in Gaza has been something that Israel has been very against.
Right.
Because Israel considers this, what Iran calls the axis of resistance, Israel considers this to be an axis of like evil or terror, whatever they want to say, right? And that's because they are saying that if Iran didn't back these groups, then Israel would be safe. And if Iran's government didn't exist, Israel would be safe. I think what is extremely important to realize in this argument is that one way to make sure that Israel is safe is to not occupy and put people of Palestine under a military occupation. Because whenever throughout history you see a people be occupied and put under oppressive, brutal military control and occupation, there is always a movement for liberation and resistance and retaliation. Now, I want to be very clear because people are getting too comfortable being Islamophobic and racist and, throwing their Orientalist BS around and calling everybody that critiques the US and Israel led operation and war on Iran as like some sort of a jihadist, pro jihadist propaganda.
Right.
Get a freaking grip, okay? Critiquing a country like Israel's military occupation of Palestine and making a critical analysis of the fact that what we're seeing today is a result of that occupation and colonization is not just my words.
No.
You want to fight with me? Go first fight with all of the experts in the field of human rights that have completely supported everything I've just said, right? And I'm getting this from them as well, right? So it's important to keep in mind that we have to make sure that it is not being misconstrued. Like our conversation is not being misconstrued. What we're trying to say here is that Iran has been placed in a very, very difficult situation by the US sanctions.
Yes.
And then after October 7th and the attacks on Israel and the subsequent, genocide that has taken place in Gaza by Israel, you see intensified villainization and attacks on Iran as well. So we saw that last year in June of 2025 when there was the 12-day war that Iran and Israel had. And then the United States ended that war by dropping bombs on an Iranian nuclear facility. Apparently, no uranium was found after those attacks. But we were told by Donald Trump and by all of his administration that that was it. The world is a better place because Iran's nuclear program has been destroyed. Fast forward to today. Apparently now, again, Iran is 2 weeks away from developing an atom bomb or whatever. And US and Israel have started this war with Iran again. And something that is even more alarming at this point is that this is very much, I know there are certain political science scholars that say we are in World War III. I personally tend to agree with them, but I also know that many don't agree with that. But I think like you have a front in Europe between Ukraine and Russia, where you're seeing Russia, China, India, Iran, and then you have Ukraine and NATO. and Israel.
Yeah.
And on the other side, now you have Israel and Gaza. Now
Yeah.
you have and Palestine. Honestly, even the West Bank, like
Yeah.
the life is not good there right now.
No.
Israel is conducting horrific
No, the
attacks
Kushner's
there.
fucking suck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that too. And then on the other end, now you have this war on Iran, where Iran is retaliating against U.S. military assets and Israel. So U.S. military assets in the region also include, U.S. military bases in the Gulf countries, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in United Arab Emirates, in Oman, in Kuwait, in Bahrain. And I think that this war that Trump has started on behest of Netanyahu, or maybe they came up with this together. I think it's going to be a very big miscalculation, just as the war in Vietnam was, because
Yeah.
Iran might not be able to win the war as like a victor.
Right.
But I think that their
Tactic.
tactic right now is that if we go down, we'll take as many people down with us as possible.
That's such a good point, though, because the thing is that Iran has, these ballistic missiles. They have these tools. They have these weapons that they're producing at much lower costs than the U.S.'s
The
interceptors.
Shahid drones.
Exactly. And in order to build enough interceptors to keep up with all of these bombs that Iran is sending, the U.S. and Israel are bleeding money, right? And they won't be able to keep up with them for who knows how long, right? And so Iran is taking that advantage right now to say, we're going to cause as much mayhem as possible. Because a Shahed drone by Iran might cost something like 20 to 40, maybe $50,000 to make, but a missile that can intercept that costs about $1 million. And so very drastic difference. And so now the US is effectively running out of time. The US now is sort of banking on this, and the folks at Novara Media also said this, but the US is sort of banking on the patterns in their history, whereas, in the last century, no one's been able to like bomb a country in order to, instill a regime change. Trump's now speaking up about how he wants to pipe in about this regime change. It's like, wow, what a big shocker. But how long will this war go on? How long will this aggression last? And I think what we're starting to see is how his ego and his overconfidence is really getting the best of their military tactics as well.
And I think Trump and his ego, as you mentioned, is very important here, because we did an episode this year on the operation that America conducted where they kidnapped Maduro. And I honestly think Trump thought this was going to be that sort of an operation.
Right.
What the miscalculation here is that Iran is not Venezuela. And when I say that, what I mean is that Iran has way more experience in military operations and has a whole arsenal of weapons that Venezuela did not have. And something that was a little bit weird that happened was Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of America, recently, like 2 days ago, in a quick like press interview, said like, oh yeah, we only joined this war because we found out that Israel was going to bomb Iran, and
Right.
if Israel was going to do that, Iran was going to retaliate and it was going to affect America as well, so we just joined with them. And I'm like, this is not like, oh, my friend was going to go to the club,
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to the club, but I know that my friend sometimes goes to the club and gets a little bit too hammered, so I just like went to the club with my friend. This is a war, which is
Yes.
now maybe Third World War.
Yes.
And
across oceans.
And also, please don't insult our intelligence.
Yeah.
If the United States wanted, it could have very easily said, Israel, stop. And that's what Trump did last year, where Israeli bombers were towards the end of the 12-day war, Israeli bombers were in air. They were going to Iran, and Trump literally in the media said, Israel, turned those planes around. And Israel did.
Yeah.
So I think this is very important. Like, don't insult our intelligence. At the end of the day, there was this quote, and I don't know who said it, but if somebody knows, please comment, or I can also find out and comment. But they said, by the end of every war, the rich people count their money, the leaders negotiate and shake hands, and the only people left with the dead bodies are the poor, and they're the dead bodies of their children. I think everybody that is drumming the beats for war,
keep that in mind.
And I mean, I think they don't care. Like you had Condoleezza Rice recently go on and make this entire, claim about like, yeah, finally we're doing this. And I'm like, Condoleezza Rice, you said the same things about the war in Iraq when you were working for the Bush administration.
Girl.
Who are you now to pretend that you have any sort of political acumen related to this topic to speak on geopolitics here, specifically about regime change and invasion of a country that, frankly, you probably view through very Orientalist, Eurocentric, and racist point of view. Yes, I call Condoleezza Rice racist because guess what? That is possible.
Yeah.
People of all races can uphold white supremacy, and in this case, she does that. And I think like right now things are very fragile.
Yeah.
When I was talking about World War III potentially earlier, now Donald Trump has also hinted that there could be soon a very friendly takeover of Cuba. He also now
friendly takeover of Cuba.
I don't know what that means. And then, well, I know what that means, but it's quite sad and dark. And then also, very recently, U.S. has now joined the government in Ecuador to launch some military operation. I don't know enough details about it. I need to look it up, but I just read it right before recording this, so I need to properly, review that. And I think we just have to be very careful that when we do talk about what's happening now, we don't take pleasure in very like short-sighted view of, oh yeah, once the Islamic regime in the Islamic Republic of Iran, Islamic regime is overthrown, everything will be great. Like, A, you don't know that. B, joke of it all, that Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Iran, who's passed away, his son now is called Reza Pahlavi.
Yeah.
Reza Pahlavi, reporters asked Trump 2 or 3 days ago, do you think it's time for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to go back to Iran, and like, is he your pick? And Trump was like, no, I think we need somebody that is popular in Iran and somebody that's there. But, in the recent bombing campaigns that Israel and we have done, we've actually accidentally like killed a couple of people that we picked out as replacements. No, like we're actually being led by idiots. No, it's so bad. And I say this with all the love and just begging honorary Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, please, we are begging you to not drag Canada into a war that is going to leave such a dark stain on our history.
Yes.
And I really
applaud led by an idiot.
Yeah, and I really applaud the government of Spain for taking a stance so far. Unlike Australia, UK, Germany, everybody else that is just like, do it. Yeah, Australia is like, we are a Labour government, but we don't care. But I do want to say, I think it would be a grave miscarriage of justice, and a stain on Canada's history that will yet again not be ever washable if we fall into the trap of that the way to liberate people is to bomb them. Yeah. And I know that our critics of our point of views will say, where were you when the Iranian Islamic regime was killing thousands of people in protest? Yeah, you know what? You might not have known that, but we were actually actively speaking up against it. Yeah. We were organizing in the community. We were learning. We were making sure. Yeah. Like, again, being anti-monarchist does not mean that all of a sudden you support, an oppressive regime that kills
thousands of other people.
But it's important to keep in mind that the government in Iran is oppressive. So is the American regime right now. They are, killing American citizens. Yeah. They are, and I'm not comparing the two. Calm down for anybody that's like, how you can't compare America to Iran.
Well, they're accelerating.
They're accelerating. Things start small and then they, become worse and worse. But I don't believe that anybody in their right mind should ever say, you know what's a great solution to liberate the people of Minnesota? Bomb him.
No.
Of course not. Like, that is, do you even hear yourself?
Yeah.
That is so disappointing.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry, like, frankly, very embarrassing in the long run.
Yeah.
I can disagree, and I have said it before, I have disagreed with my own country of origin's government and policies sometimes, right? Yeah. That never means that I ever want a foreign power to go and bomb Pakistan.
No.
Like, that makes zero sense. Mm-hmm. Also, if we're talking about liberating women, it's very funny that up until a few years ago, women in Saudi Arabia could not drive. But none of these monarchists were talking about, or other people were saying
Yeah,
that we should bomb Saudi women into freedom.
exactly.
Why? Because it's a US ally. And you should not bomb anybody into freedom because that does not work. We literally
No,
had experiences with Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. We've had time and again. Israel has been bombing Gaza for 2 years. They still haven't been able to finish Hamas.
no.
What are you going into this for? Basically, the war and the weapons manufacturing industry is going to make a buttload of money, and that's where we are right now. I'm genuinely like my heart is like weeping for the people of Iran
Of
who
course.
have been yearning for freedom, but at the same time are now being bombed. And it's,
And also, so many of their neighbors and peers are
yeah,
asking for that and are praising that, right? Like it's like we talk about, like working people are not the ones that are going to benefit from war. It is the elite, and it is the very few elite that hold power over the rest of us that are benefiting from war. Just like you said, this war specifically that has begun to spiral so much and involve so many countries now. In the US, it's being referred to by folks like Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Ted Cruz, even some higher military commanders are calling this the Holy War. Which, like, didn't Octavia Butler say that this would happen? Like,
who's Octavia Butler for our audience?
for if you don't know, Octavia Butler is my favorite author. She is the author of Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. They're books that are science fiction. She wrote them in the 1990s, and they start off based in 2024, and they talk about exactly the themes that we're
Seeing
seeing
now,
in
yeah.
Trump's presidency, right? She talks about this figurehead that's almost like that is very similar to the Trump that we see
Yeah.
today, even, you know, word for word saying the slogan, Make America Great Again.
Mm-hmm.
She's a genius. Unfortunately, she died too soon, but she was an incredible genius whose words I refer to every single
Yeah.
day, particularly as we're in this latest
So what you're
aggression.
saying is like we're living through like a horrible, horrible,
Exactly.
horrible science fiction.
Yeah, all of the science fiction novels, horror stories that we've read that were really
Yeah.
exciting are also, the worst. And I think what I'm trying to say here specifically is that there's a point in Parable of the Sower and the Talents where Octavia Butler sort of refers to this right wing presidential figure um, as moving people through this cult like mindset that is really based on these Christian principles. And so it really and so this is something that I've been losing my mind over
Because we're
lately.
seeing that happen in real
Exactly. You're
life.
calling it the Holy War? As in, like, how Islamophobic, how, like, polarizing. I refer to Octavia Butler also because she talks, the commentary she makes in a lot of her books about, like, she writes science fiction, but the commentary that she makes in a lot of her books is that political governance and these political power games that are played, they follow a lot of patterns, right? People take tactics from each other's playbooks throughout history. And this is one that she predicted that we would, take
Yeah,
on in
absolutely.
in the 2020s. So, and now we're seeing countries like Azerbaijan and Turkey even considering getting involved. Azerbaijan was just attacked, and Iran is saying that it wasn't them, but also the U.S. and Israel are also saying it wasn't them. So what's going on here, right? This agitation of other countries in the region is escalating this global war. That's what we're seeing, and we're going to continue monitoring this, of course. But
Of course, yeah.
this is the current escalation that we're seeing really happen in front of our eyes.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's I know I think we should probably end the episode soon here,
Yeah,
and but I would just want to
yeah.
reiterate what you said. Like, it is absolutely disgusting listening to Senator Lindsey Graham right now talking about, and also Mike Johnson, I think, who's the
Mhm.
um, House leader in the U.S. Congress right now for the
And they were
Republicans.
bad enough before.
And they're just saying horrible Islamophobic, racist things. Like, you can look those up. It's like post 9/11-ish world that we're living
Yeah,
in
yeah,
again.
yeah.
And I think that we really have to make sure that we don't let hate and division again divide us when it comes to standing up against war.
Yeah,
I feel like that's should be a very non-controversial thing to say,
it is.
that war is bad.
It is. And the thing is, are
And
these
yeah,
powerful
yeah,
leaders that are playing these power games, they're making us go through this
yeah.
tennis every like 5 years of the cultural, revolutions and the cultural progress that we make as people that are finding unity amongst ourselves. They put us through this tennis
Hmm.
so that they can play their own power
I mean, it's
games.
the elite making money. That's what it
Exactly.
is.
That's what yeah.
And I think something that's been also really troubling to see is like, I think the same points that were used against Palestine are now being used against Iran. So, like, for
Yes.
instance, people are saying, well, the Allied forces, bombed German cities and we were able to overthrow the Nazis. And it's what you were saying about Navarro media. It's like, first of all, after World War II, we specifically decided and met as a global community and said
Yes.
that cannot happen again.
Yeah.
The Holocaust cannot happen again. And also the civilian casualties that we're seeing in conflicts and wars cannot happen again.
Yeah.
That's why we have the Geneva Conventions. That's
Yeah.
why we have Raphael Lemkin's Institute on Genocide. That's why there is so much work that was done after that to try to create a better world. So to just say like, oh well, the Allied forces did it, so should we. Like, no,
No.
that's not how things should work.
No.
That's not the future I want
Yes.
my
Yes.
friends and family and loved ones and
Yeah.
coming generations to ever see.
Yeah.
I do want to say, like, it's also been really disheartening to see the attack on the girls' elementary school
Yes.
in Iran, which was, I think, in the first day of war.
Yeah.
Israel and US are kind of saying, well, Israel is saying, like, and monarchists are saying that it was the Iranian government that did it, or they're
Oh,
saying
I didn't even know that they were making those claims.
yeah, there's this thing that initially they were like, these images are from Peshawar, Pakistan, and
I
then
see.
everybody was like, that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not from Peshawar,
No.
Pakistan. And then
No.
people were like, oh well, it's actually the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Corps Guard in Iran that did it. People were like, okay, is there proof of that? And then you
Yeah.
have like even independent Iranian journalists abroad in America, in Canada, saying there is no proof so far that
Yeah.
Iran did this to their own children.
Right.
And then now there is like some commentary from pro-Israel groups online and monarchist groups that are saying, well, actually, Israel or America did attack it, but it's not our fault because the school was next to a naval base. And then you have independent journalists who are not affiliated with all of
No.
these, mainstream media
Yes.
outlets. Some of them are, some of them aren't, that are saying, well, by just doing an online search, we were able to find out that like the exact part where the school is was no longer part of the base since 2016. So if we can find it out just through open source information,
Yes.
Israel and America knew that too.
Yes.
So we're not like claiming we know what happened, but even just to see like the death of over 160, 70 people, mostly children, mostly girls,
Exactly.
in a school,
Yeah.
it's devastating to see how it's being politicized. Like either we didn't do it or we did it and it's because of this and it's that, and it's just like we need the war to end.
Yes. We don't need to keep all this bickering happening. It needs to be over.
And the last thing I would say is that the government of Oman was brokering the negotiations between US and Iran right before Israel decided to go ahead and bomb, and then America joined. Right? So the Omani foreign minister, I believe, was in speaking to CNN because a day before the attacks happened, he didn't trust. This is the intel that's coming from Drop Site News and other journalists.
Which, if you haven't checked out Drop Site yet, you should.
Drop Site News, Breaking Points, Samira Moyuddin, Navarro Media. Check those out.
Yeah.
But basically, like, there's some intel coming out that he chose to go and speak to the American public and say that Iran had agreed to a deal that was going to be better than the Iran nuclear deal that Obama got.
Oh, yes.
And people are like, why did he just go to the media and say that America next day joins Israel in this war? And the intel is that the Omani government didn't trust Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and the Trump administration. And they were worried that just like last year, the negotiations were all for show,
Yeah.
and they were just going to go ahead and attack Iran anyway.
Yeah.
So the government of Oman went on the record to
Yeah.
American media saying,
Yeah.
we're very close to a deal. It's going to be great. Iran has agreed to like zero enrichment. Iran has agreed to all of these things.
Yeah.
But here we are in this twisted world.
Yeah.
We will keep on monitoring the situation and keep on updating you guys. And Lubaba, please.
Yeah, and if you do want to do something about, this world war that we're, becoming engulfed in, I think it's really important to plug into what community organizing you can do in your neighborhood, right? As I always say, like talk to your neighbors, go to a march. It's really important that we in the West really do vocalize an anti-war stance right now, because as we've said, these bombs are not what's going to liberate the Iranian people. It is them being able to preserve their autonomy in order to be able to have that actual ability to guide a just transition, whatever that they decide it looks like. It is the Iranian people that need to be centered at the end of the day. And we need to be able to say, no, we as Canadians, we as anti-war
people of conscience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People of conscience. We oppose this war, and we don't want our dollars going towards global destruction. We want our dollars to go back into people. And so something that, a lot of people are doing in Toronto, folks are going to anti-war marches, folks are going to anti-war rallies, folks are making lots of art with each other, and also people are going postering in their neighborhoods.
And phone banking.
Exactly, and phone banking, calling your MPs. And telling them, calling your MPs, calling Prime Minister Carney and saying, I oppose this war. Spring Magazine has a lot of really great posters that they just released that say, fund healthcare, not war. Fund education, not war. Fund childcare, not war. All these different things that are really basic ideas and principles, but these are things that we can unite people around, particularly when we are not on site where these aggressions are happening, where this violence is happening. And so those are really important ways that you can get involved in your community, aside from supporting independent journalists like ourselves.
Yeah, I guess we're calling ourselves journalists now. But on
We're
that note,
independent media. Yeah.
On that note, this has been The Third Take. My name is Taha.
My name's Lubaba. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Spotify, leave us 5 stars on Spotify, you want to, and tell us what we should talk about next.
And follow us on Instagram at The Third Take Pod. Thank you so much, everyone, and stay safe.